Howdy y'all, welcome back. Today, we are going to look at a handful of the oldest photographs ever taken of the country of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. These images come to us from the archives of Linnaeus Tripe, a famed photographer born in Devon, England in 1822. By 1838, at the age of 16, he joined the East India Company, rising to lieutenant stationed in India by 1840. We're told he remained in India until 1850, returning home to England due to poor health. This is an interesting tidbit because while back in England, he quickly learned the practice of photography and joined the Photographic Studio of London before returning to India as a captain of the East India Company in 1854. Here, he took the incredible photographs that we are looking at today, which I have gone through and translated the titles and labeled each image with the date that they were taken. In 1855, he entered his photographs into the Exhibition of Raw Products, Arts, and Manufacturers of Southern India, where he won the gold medal for his photographic display of Burmese architecture, quoted by the judges as being, quote, the best series of photographic views ever put to paper, end quote. The history of Myanmar, or Burma, begins with the founding of the Pagan dynasty. In myths and legends, the Pagan dynasty was founded directly by the clan of Buddha and the first Buddhist king. However, Middle-aged scholars place the founding of the Pagan dynasty to roughly the 9th century BC, many years before the Buddha was born. Furthermore, the narrative makes it clear that Myanmar was already occupied by indigenous people before the Buddha clan arrived, but that Buddha was said to be the first to unify the people and introduce religion. Now, according to modern scholars, the earliest archaeological evidence of civilization dates to 11,000 BC. We're told by roughly 2500 BC, Myanmar had many intricate water management systems providing water to the temples. We're also told by roughly December of 1044, the first pagan prince came to power in Myanmar, and from here, he greatly extended the Pagan Empire to become a world power. This Pagan Empire continued to thrive with megalithic structures and intricate water systems until Myanmar was conquered by the Golden Horde. What followed was years of warring, according to the narrative, followed by the British taking control of Burma after a series of wars in the early to mid-19th century. So again, as photography was being introduced to Myanmar, the British were seizing control of this ancient and beautiful landscape, full of these immaculate, old world pieces of architecture and Antiquitech. Now, obviously, all of these photographs really intrigued me. But this one in particular, again, these photographs were taken in the 1850s. We can see here there are just piles of fresh stonework that are lining the streets. And at the same time, we do not see anything being built. This is just outside one of these old world style buildings that existed in Myanmar. And we can only imagine that during this time, the British were coming in and they were changing the history itself by changing the architecture, by changing the landscape, and by rewriting certain portions of the narrative. We look up at the top of these buildings, and this is Antiquitech at its finest. It may have a purpose, but what is that purpose? I'd truly love to know. As I've told you before, as we dive into the history of these oldest locations, looking at the oldest photographs, the images that have been made available for us, images from private archives, private collectors, museums, things like that, we always want to take that history and the narrative associated with it with a grain of salt, because this image really stood out to me when I saw it. This photograph is absolutely beautiful, and yet as we zoom in and look at the details, something that stands out to us, one, we can see all the clouds in the sky. So that made me look at the details even further. And I believe this could be a drawing and not an actual photograph. However, we do have images like this one that also show the sky. And these appear to be full-fledged photographs that have not been altered, they have not been drawn or etched or anything like that. They appear to be the real deal. So I wanted to share with you these incredible images because these appear to show a much older location than some of the photographs that have been touched up, some of the photographs that have been altered. I wanted to give you a look at the photographs that appeared to be the most natural and could even show us the clouds and the sky and things like that. Something else that really stands out about these temples and the architecture that's being founded here in Myanmar and these photographs from the 1850s, we can see first of all that the architecture is very unique, but it's also very similar. All of these temples have something about them that makes them very similar. And beyond that, we can see, especially in this photograph here and in the next one, these temples are very secluded. There are not any major cities around them, and it doesn't appear that there are even roads that are leading to these temples. And this photograph really stood out to me because, again, we're seeing what you may call Antiquitech over here on the far left. We have this big pole with this ornamentation on the end of it, but I also was so taken aback by these massive dog-like or lion-like creatures that are standing guard out front of this temple, because this architecture itself appears to be absolutely ancient. I know we're told the Pagan Empire, according to modern scholars, only began in Myanmar in roughly the year 900. But when we dive into the narrative and actually look at the architecture itself, we can see that it's absolutely ancient. And when we compare it to other structures that were founded around that same time period, other similar structures that were being built further away in India and in other locations in the East, we can begin to see that these locations in Myanmar might be some of the most ancient of all. I thought that this really creates a nice dichotomy when we're looking in these locations that appear to have these secluded castles and temples that are so ancient yet so advanced looking. It's hard to explain exactly where they came from. I know we have a current narrative that gives us the details that we are supposed to believe, but if you actually look at the landscape itself, it's just really hard to imagine that these sort of structures came into fruition at the times that we're told that they did, in the means that we're told that they came into fruition through. So that leads me to this image right here. Essentially, we are being told this is one of the main barracks for one of the major armies in Myanmar at this time called Burma. But these are the buildings that were being constructed at that time for the soldiers, the most important soldiers that were guarding this kingdom. They were being stationed in locations like this, really looking makeshift, really looking like there is not a lot to the architecture. And I understand that, but when we get to America and even in Europe, we're being told that entire star forts were being created. Intricate star forts were being created in a matter of months in different locations. And that's where our soldiers were being stationed. And yet over in these locations where we have massive temples and massive buildings, where the architecture at this time and the ancient architecture far exceeds what we were seeing built in places like America at this time. I just believe that that creates a great dichotomy that we really haven't fully understood yet, because a lot of us, at least who research the old world, we understand the concept of inheriting something, whether you are someone who has inherited a building, inherited a ruin, inherited a castle. Most of the time, you change the history, you rewrite the history, you renovate the building, you build on top of the ruins, and you make something new out of it. And most people forget over time. It's only now that we're beginning to go through archives and through history and try to uncover what was actually going on. So what I believe is that a lot of these massive temples that were being founded in Myanmar and Burma, I believe many of them are very, very ancient. And I believe for many centuries after the Mongol invasion of Myanmar, after Burma was taken out by the Golden Horde, I believe that these locations were really not reoccupied until roughly around the time of photography. But that is only a theory, just a little bit of food for thought as we dive into these photographs. And these images are absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite things to do on my channel is to find for you the first photographs or the earliest photographs ever taken of major locations. And when you look at Burma and the Burmese architecture, these award-winning photographs, really they stand out to us, not only because what they depict, but also because the narrative we're given regarding the history of Burma and how really everything we're told was destroyed by the Mongolians, destroyed by the Golden Horde, and then it was rebuilt through different dynasties before being taken over by the British and then rebuilt again. And that is around the time of the photographs we are looking at. These would be the first introduction to the rest of the world of what Burma and the Burmese architecture look like. And now today's Myanmar really has a history that has been skewed by all these different people who came in, different groups, different colonizers who wanted to take over, take control of this architecture and change the history. So luckily for us, we do have these photographs from the 1850s that show us what this location looked like. However, we may never fully know the true history. I would love to hear your opinion in the comment section down below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will talk again on the next video.